Fade in. Setting. Interior. What time is it? I asked myself as I slowly woke up from a strange dream I was having. I let out a... Must have been out for a minute. What I saw before me wasn't my usual office. In fact, it wasn't even an office. I was in a room. An empty room at that. The only thing that was in here besides myself was a table, a typewriter, and a chair. A chair that I have been tied to, it seems. As I struggled to break free from the ropes, the typewriter begins to type. Upon closer inspection, I found myself reading some of the dialogue that it was typing. Wait a second, it's just describing everything that I'm doing. But why? Unless... Wait a second, I recognize this type of sentence structure. It's not just typing out what I'm doing, it's typing out a whole script. I took a minute to briefly recollect everything that has happened. 1 minute I was at my car, the next I'm here, tied to a chair, trapped inside a room with an autonomous typewriter. The question is, who? Who knocked me out and dragged me here? Who is it? Is it a friend of mine? Who is it? Is it my brother? Who is it? Maybe someone who wanted to hurt my soul? I looked back at the typewriter. Then I saw a single word. Olympia. Then, like a push-button pen, my mind clicked. That's the typewriter. The 1937 Olympia Elite. Those vague notes about cutting us out of the script. This is what it means. That thing isn't just making a random script. No, that thing is somehow connected to this very narrative. A door suddenly opens, and a voice rings out. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. I turned my attention to the door to see none other than the infamous smooth criminal himself. Standing beside him were two very muscular neckos. These guys may as well have been werecats with the way they were built. The pleasure is mine, mister. Or should I say, Mrs. I think you know exactly what I mean, Janice. The criminal took off her hat and confirmed my suspicion. So it was you, Janice. You were the one going around and masquerading as the infamous smooth criminal, or at least his doppelganger. You see, Janice, I managed to conclude that it had to be you because of the simple fact you brought neckos built like wildcats as your bodyguards instead of members of the Soon Gang. Not to mention, the culprits of that one-side shootout at that pawn shop were neckos as well. But that's not all. It would be one thing if a random guy threw on a suit and committed a homicide for any random reason, but there were simply far too many coincidences. The suit, the owner of said suit, as well as a piece of literature that was also his property, all went missing at the same time. And a week afterwards, Annie would forcibly change her status from living to deceased. Not to mention, I spoke to Miss Morrigan, and not only did she reveal that she had worked with Annie, but the same mysterious person in that exact suit came to her shows only once. It confused me at first. Why would someone like that only come to one of her shows out of a dozen or so they could have gone to? Unless they, or should I say you, Janice, had a reason for being there. You were scoping out your target, knowing good and well that you would become a sight for sore eyes immediately afterwards. After all, that suit is a little too significant to miss. But that still leaves some nagging questions. Where is BP, and what does he have to do with any of this? Why do you have this typewriter here? And most importantly, why? Why did you get rid of Annie? Janice lifted her head back and let out a chuckle. After insulting my supposedly great detective skills, she then starts to explain herself. Janice and Annie met a while back, and Annie became Janice's crush. Janice was trying to psych herself up to ask Annie out, but unfortunately, it became clear that Annie had set her eyes on another person. BP. It was painfully clear to Janice that Annie didn't see her in that way, and jealousy slowly but surely overtook her. She wanted BP out of the picture, but knew that eliminating him wasn't an option. Janice was smart enough to know that I would eventually link her to the crime either way, so she held off, sulking away in her sadness, and buying the only thing that could simulate having her in her possession, Annie's typewriter, which she purchased after discovering it in the pawn shop. She was messing around with it one day and discovered that the typewriter was anomalous and possessed the ability to turn any narrative work into actual reality. Unlike Annie, Janice wasn't a writer, but she was an editor, to say the least. So she kidnapped BP, who was also a writer, and stole his script, along with his cosplay suit. She then inserted his unfinished script into the typewriter and worked its magic. In other words, this is his script we're currently in. You just stole it to take control of the narrative. So that explains that. But why pluck Annie out of the picture? What a shame. Getting rid of her just because you couldn't have her to yourself? In fact, if you were any smarter, Janice, you could have just simply rewrote this narrative so that it would end in the two of you getting together and having some cliché happy ending. Like what, 90% of ASMR roleplays already? An issue. What would that be? So what you're saying is, the listener and I were the only two people who couldn't be completely affected by the narrative. I see. So you were trying to get rid of us, and purposely led us on a wild goose chase from the start. From blaming Jerome's demise at the hands of the Soon Gang, to creating a Bulletstorm version of Hurricane Katrina inside the pawn shop. Us meddling kids, huh? Well, either way, you clearly failed your grand master plan. You failed because you jumped the gun too soon. Maybe if you actually stopped and wrote this thing out, you might have successfully led us astray. But you didn't. Now here you are trying to quickly take matters into your own hands. Janice pulled out a big iron and leveled it with that of my forehead. Not clever enough, you say? Well, I guess you're right. But there is one thing you still didn't count on. I brought backup. The listener stood behind Janice with their side piece aimed directly at the back of her pretty little head. Don't worry, Janice. Your neckos are fine. They're currently outside playing with a ball of yarn. What did you expect? They are neckos after all. Janice let out a defeated sigh and dropped her weapon. Just as the listener was closing in to arrest her, she swiftly elbows them, causing them to drop their weapon as well. A struggle between Janice and the listener ensued while I was quickly trying to break free from the ropes. Got it. Just as I got up, the listener was suddenly thrown towards my direction, causing us both to collapse onto the ground. Janice stood over us with her big iron. She aimed it perfectly at the listener and pulled the trigger. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just wanted proper payback for saving me earlier, but I launched myself at what should have been the bullet's trajectory, expecting to get hit. But nothing. In fact, I was unscathed. Me, the listener, and Janice turned our attention towards the bullet that should have struck me. Instead, it just froze in midair, as if it decided to do a pacifist run and stopped itself. The bullet eventually disintegrated. While we all wore a face of disbelief, Janice pulled the trigger again, but it appeared that the gun had mysteriously jammed itself. Janice repeatedly tried to use the jammed weapon in succession in frustration, like a mower that refused to start. A sudden whack was heard, and Janice stood still for a brief moment before her and her big iron hit the ground. We looked up and saw that it was the writer of this script himself. BP. Oh, thanks. He apologized for all the trouble his script had caused. He then pulled it out of the typewriter, turned, and left, but not right before marking the reality-bending object with 2 large bruises made by 2 bullets. Well, that just happened. Fade out. Fade in. Ambience. City. Nighttime. We watched as Janice was dragged away in handcuffs and into a police cruiser. After the officer shut the door behind her, the vehicle took off. Well, I think it's safe to say that this case is closed. Why do you feel bummed out about it? You were having fun, huh? Well, I'll admit, working with you wasn't so bad. I kind of had fun myself. I mean, the case is closed and the mystery has been solved, so this tale is technically over. Oh, I see what you're doing. Sorry, kiddo, but this isn't your usual generic something-to-lovers roleplay. I'm afraid you'll have to look elsewhere for that. Cheer up. I'm sure anyone other than myself would be more than happy to take you up on that. As for me, I think I'm going to head back to the office. I still have an audio to finish. Nah, I think I'll hold off on hiring assistants. For now, at least. I walked over to my car and opened the door. I stopped and looked up at the listener one last time. No, you can't hear me narrating again. Whatever. We gave each other a farewell salute. Then I got in my car and drove away. Fade out. Fade in. Setting. Afternoon. A shadow resembling that of a woman is seen walking into the sunset. And thus, this brings us to the end of this ludicrously verbose tale. So kids, what did we learn? For me, I learned that if I have time to ask for the time, then I can wait a month before looking for a new assistant. Or maybe 2 months. Nah, 3. We'll give it 3 months. Either way, I'm no hero, and I'm no professional detective. I'm just a voice actor who babbles words on paper for the funnies. If you're looking for someone to help you with a problem that even the problem solver squad can't solve, then you better keep looking. Why? Because I ain't the real deal. If anything, I'm just fake. Fade out. Letters fade in reading. Finn. Credits. Fake, played by Fake ASMR. BP, played by BP. The Listener, played by The Listener. Janice, Annie, Jerome, Morgan Mayday, and Thatch, played by Janice, Annie, Jerome, Morgan Mayday, and Thatch, respectively. Fade out. I could become a detective, but I would only solve ASMR-related crimes. So, like, if you're stealing somebody's audios, I'm gonna get you.